días, amigos. Our lesson today is about the Andes Mountains, which are the longest range of mountains in the world and the second highest. The Andes Mountains are located on the western side of the South American continent, reaching all the way from Tierra del Fuego up to the Caribbean Sea, a distance of 4,500 miles. The Andes Mountains divide the continent into what we call the Pacific South America, this little area along here, and the Atlantic South America, this side. There are several peaks in the Andes Mountains, over 20,000 feet high, and even the passes in the Andes Mountains are over 10,000 feet high. The highest peak in the Western Hemisphere, that's North or South America, is Aconcagua, 22,834 feet high. Aconcagua is in Argentina, near the border of Chile.
The Andes Mountains can be divided into three natural regions. The northern region, which is in Colombia and Ecuador, the central region, which is in Peru and Bolivia, and the southern region on the border between Chile and Argentina.
In Colombia, there are three ranges of the Andes Mountains, right in here. In Ecuador, there are two ranges, or cordilleras, as they're sometimes called. Cordillera. That's a Spanish word meaning range of mountains. In the northern region of the Andes Mountains, in Colombia and in Ecuador, the mountains are covered with tropical rainforest, and they're so green and so lush. While the central region, that's in Peru and Bolivia, we find two ranges of mountains with a high plateau between these mountains. This high plateau or plain is called altiplano. Altiplano. That's a Spanish word which means high plain. Did you know that the Altiplano is one of the highest inhabited areas in the world? It's over 12,000 feet high. The Quechuas and Aymara Indians live here. The air is very, very thin. Also on the Altiplano we find Lake Titicaca, the highest navigable lake in the world. The Indians who live in this area fish in the lake. They travel on the lake in their boats, like this Totora reed boat that you see there, and there's an Indian woman gathering grass out of the lake to feed her cows. The Indians are farmers in this area, and they graze their animals, sheep, alpacas, and llamas, and they raise corn and wheat. Most of the work is done by hand, but occasionally you see a tractor, such as this one here, doing a little bit of plowing on the farmland. The southern region of the Andes Mountains has some of the most beautiful scenery you would find anywhere in the world. Beautiful rivers and waterfalls, and mountains with glaciers and snow-capped peaks, jagged. These mountains were carved by a glacier. Aren't they lovely? The Andes Mountains are also the source of many rivers, such as the Paraná, the Orinoco, and the Amazon. Do you know the Amazon River started in the Peruvian Andes? The Andes Mountains also have a very strong influence on the climate of the South American continent. They act sort of like a barrier, blocking the rain clouds, which causes a jungle on one side of the mountain and a desert on the other side. The altitude also affects the climate. Moisture at the lower level falls as rain, and at the higher levels as snow. Then the water drains into Lake Titicaca or into the Atlantic or the Pacific. Most of South America's largest cities are located on the coast, but there's some important cities high in the Andes, such as La Paz. La Paz is over 12,000 feet high. It's the capital of Bolivia. Also high in the Andes are other capital cities. This is Quito. Quito is the capital of Ecuador, surrounded by mountain peaks. And then There's Bogota, Colombia, located above 8,000 feet in the Andes Mountains. So we do have some large and very modern cities in the Andes Mountains. People have been living in the Andes Mountains for thousands of years, and we find some archaeological ruins such as San Agustin in Colombia, pre-Inca civilization. And then, of course, there's wonderful Machu Picchu. Machu Picchu is in the Peruvian Andes. And then Tiwanaku, a pre-Inca civilization, is also found in the Andes Mountains on the Altiplano. But who lives in the Andes Mountains today? Well, mainly South American Indians. In this marketplace, you can see them busy selling things. This woman is weaving. She's spinning. She's spinning wool from the llama into a yarn, and then from that she will make cloth and make clothing. This woman is selling potatoes. High in the Andes Mountains, the Altiplano is the home of the potato. From there it was taken all over the world. There are over 200 different kinds of potatoes. The people who live in the Andes Mountains, high in the Andes Mountains, because the air is so thin, they have a larger heart and larger lungs so that they can adjust to the very thin air and not become breathless and pant, like we do when we go there. In the Andes Mountains of Chile and Argentina, we find many national parks. The people come to these parks to enjoy the beauty, the glaciers, the mountain peaks, the swimming, the hiking. And we find activities in this part of the Andes Mountains very much as we would find in Canada and in the United States. Ski resorts, camping areas, hiking trails. Most of the people who live in Chile and Argentina are of European background, and they like to do the same types of things that they have done in Europe, skiing and camping and hiking. You do not find the South American Indians, for example, skiing. They live in the Andes Mountains more in Bolivia and Peru and Ecuador. But in the southern region, we find activities very much like we have in the United States. The Andes Mountains are made of sedimentary rock. They were once part of the floor of the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, and they were thrust up. They're still growing. Many of the highest mountain peaks are volcanoes. Some are still active, and there's a lot of earthquake activity. And Quito, for example, and many of the other cities have been damaged by earthquakes. The Andes Mountains have also had a strong influence on the explorers, the adventurers, the people who have come to South America. They oftentimes act as a barrier. Cusco, capital of the Inca Empire, is found in the Peruvian Andes right near Machu Picchu, the lost city of the Inca Empire, an ancient civilization that crossed the Andes for 3,000 miles. The Andes Mountains have acted as a barrier to explorers and to conquerors and adventurers who were trying to get from one side of the continent to the other. But there's one person they did not stop, and that was San Martin. He performed one of the most remarkable feats in military history when he marched his entire army over the Andes Mountains from Mendoza, Argentina to Chile. The unexpected arrival of San Martin's army caught the Spanish off guard, and they were quickly defeated, and they liberated Chile. One of the most beautiful statues I have ever seen in the world is located on the pass between Argentina and Chile, the same pass that San Martin went over. It's the very famous Christ of the Andes statue, and it's made of bronze of melted cannons that were used in a battle between Chile and Argentina. There's been a long and bitter struggle between these two countries about the border, and then it was settled, and they made this statue, and they carried it to a peak about 12,000 feet high, first by train and then by mules, and then carried by thousands of soldiers up to the final slope. And the Chilean soldiers knelt on Argentine soil, and the Argentine soldiers knelt on Chilean soil, and they promised that between the two of them, they would keep everlasting peace between the two countries. Although much of the area in the Andes Mountains is too cold, rugged, or steep to be used by the people who live there, there are other areas that are quite valuable. For example, we find a lot of farming in the Andes Mountains. And the farming, what is being farmed depends upon the altitude. High, where it's cold and the air is thin, wheat grows well, and so does barley and potatoes, raised mainly by the Indians. On the lower slopes, where it's tropical, we find completely different crops growing in the Andes. There's cotton, bananas, sugar cane, coffee, cacao. The Andes Mountains are also used for grazing: sheep, alpacas, llamas, and cattle. And we also find forestry, lumbering, especially in Chile and Argentina. And in the Andes Mountains, we find mining. The Andean countries, Chile has a lot of copper. Bolivia, one of the world's largest tin producers. In Peru, tin, zinc, silver. In Colombia, all sorts of precious gems. Emeralds, world's largest producer of emeralds. And so mining is very important in the Andes Mountains. Today we talked just a little bit about the Andes Mountains. There's so much more, and we couldn't possibly cover it in one lesson. But there's something that I want to show you that I found in an Indian market in the Andes Mountains. Now, we have good luck charms. We have horseshoes and different charms that we carry. The Indians have this little package, which is called a good luck package, or sometimes called witchcraft. And they take all sorts of things and put it in a little package, and then will hide it in their house or bury it to bring them good luck. One of the main things, one of the good luck charms for the South American Indian is the baby llama, the fetus, the unborn little llama, and they take a sheet of gold and cover his head with it and then wrap him in little pieces of warm wool to keep him warm. That's their main good luck charm. And then they have a little charm they put in, bird, that's for happiness. And this little snake charm, that is for wisdom. And then a little house, that they will always have a nice little house to live in. And then another little charm, that they will have many children because they love children. And then a little bottle of milk, so they'll always have plenty to eat. Oh, and this is just full of all sorts of good things. There's cookies and candies and nuts and a little piece of amber. And then all of these things, they sprinkle little herbs and spices and bless it, and then put the llama wool over it, and that's one of their good luck charms. There's so many interesting things about the Andes. I hope you'll go on and learn some more about them. And until our next lesson, adios, amigos.